this is our podcast number 2 for navigating a career in the IT channel, and I'm really excited that I've got Elisha from Softcat on. Hi. Elisha and I are ridiculously similar, aren't we? And we had like a call a few weeks back, and I was like, I've got to get her on for a chat.
It's a little bit creepy, though. Let's be fair.
It was
it's
a bit
creepy. Yeah.
I nearly put a red lippy on, and I thought no, because Alicia's going to put in a red lippy on, and I don't want to do that. But Elisha she is the recruitment manager for Softcat, and you've been with Softcat now for about a decade, haven't you?
I have, yeah, 10 years in August.
Amazing. So I wanted to get you on the show today to talk about your career and where you started from and where you're at now. But we also wanted to talk about some important topics to us, didn't we? We wanted to talk about, driving diversity in the industry, but also women in the channel, which falls into the diversity catalogue very, very nicely, and just have a really good chat about all things careers and channel and diversity, and we'll probably just go on a tangent and then we'll look at the time and think, oh God,
we need to keep ourselves contained, though. This is going to get out of control.
Let's go back in. So Elisha, thank you ever so much. So really, I think just to give everybody an introduction to you, and where you started before Softcat were even a thing, really. Where did you go to school? Where did you grow up? Give us a bit of an intro to your life and everything before the world of Softcat opened your eyes.
Such a broad question. I don't even know where to start. So wind it all the way back. First and foremost, thank you for having me on. Really, as you know, I've said it to you before we started recording, really excited to just kind of come and chat with you about all the stuff we're both super, super passionate about. But in terms of the answer to that question around kind of where I came from, for lack of better wording, I think the most important thing to start off with is I was and still am the biggest technophobe you could probably ever come across. I was actually saying to one of the guys on my team today, I'm still awful 10 years later. Like, I need so much support on a day-to-day basis from our IT team.
Me too. Yeah.
So it definitely wasn't I grew up with a fire in my belly for IT or tech. That never was the case for me. If I'm honest, looking back on reflection, I had a million things I wanted to do, the standard stuff. I definitely thought I was going to be a pop star up until a really inappropriate age, like really inappropriate. And then outside of that, when I actually still do now, this is just a side hustle. Very much got my head when I came out of that pipe dream, started to think that becoming a teacher and being in that kind of education space could be something that would be relevant for me. So I went through the majority of education, definitely kind of secondary, college, into uni, with a pretty solid idea of what I thought I wanted to do. To backtrack a little bit further as well, I'm from a single parent household. So my mum pretty much raised me from kind of the age of 11 or 12, and my brother by herself. So I very much was brought up seeing that kind of stereotypical working mum doing everything. But what I will caveat that with is because she had to cover all the bases and be there for me and my brother, from a career point of view, it was definitely work to live, not live to work. And it wasn't a career she had, it was a job. And I knew very, very early on that wasn't what I wanted for myself. And I don't know where that came from. I didn't really have those, if I'm really honest, I didn't really have those role models around me growing up, people with big careers or in senior positions. That wasn't something I really had exposure to. So I think there is or was an innate drive and ambition from quite early on. And that, as I said, kind of manifested as thinking I wanted to go into teaching, and that was the right career for me. And that came mostly from me being essentially that annoying girl in school who wanted to answer every question, sit at the front of every class, hand always going up. I kind of put 2 and 2 together and got 5 and thought, I can teach people. That's something I enjoy, being the one who has the answers. So got to university, did some classroom experience, which is usually where you start getting a bit more exposure before you actually go and do a PGCE, if that's the route you do go down. Did, I think, a couple of days worth of classroom experience, and very quickly Zoe was like, this is not for me. Very, very quickly. So at that point, I had a bit of an existential crisis. was like, oh
Yeah.
my God, this thing that I thought I really, really wanted to do is no longer what I think I'm right for. Where do I go from here?
Yeah.
So finished uni, with zero idea what I wanted to do with my life. Took a
Hmm.
year out, and in my
Okay.
mind, just thought I need to have some kind of money coming in whilst I figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And that very happily and coincidentally resulted in me getting a what I thought was a temporary job at Softcat
Yeah.
on front desk reception in our Manchester office. And I haven't left for 10 years. So they've
What
been
did
trying to
they
get.
do? Did they
I
like
know.
strap you down? They're like, you're never leaving us.
I I remember coming for my interviews though, and again, we'll probably touch upon this again in a bit, but this is the power of environments and people and connection, right? And that's, I think,
mm,
why I ended up being drawn to people and talent and that sphere,
yeah,
because I
yeah,
remember it so clearly,
yeah,
getting to the Softcat Manchester office for the first time and being hit like a bus coming through those doors, and this environment that I'd never seen anything like it before.
no,
And I just it left a real stamp on me very, very quickly. And I would probably say within a couple of months of being at Softcat, I knew I can see myself here long term. And now it's just a
crikey.
case of figuring out what I want to do. Um,
Yeah,
and the great thing about Softcat is we always have done, but even more so now, we've always had a really strong focus on internal mobility and
yeah,
retaining strong internal talent and supporting and
yeah.
developing internal talent. So when it
Hmm.
became apparent after about 6 months or so that I'd kind of done reception and it wasn't going to be a long-term plan for me, the
Yeah,
question then was, you're right for Softcat. What else do you want to do? Where else do you think your
yeah,
skill set could sit effectively?
yeah.
And that is quite a privilege because not many organizations have that
Mm,
type of approach and that real want to retain internal talent in any way they
yeah,
can. So I was
yeah.
very lucky in that sense. And then fast forward 10 years, here I am. I now manage the recruitment team, or the recruitment function. That's across all of our UK, Ireland, and international offices. And I manage the
Crikey.
recruitment strategy for Softcat. So yeah, that's kind of takes us from there through to today in a bit of a whistle stop tour.
Yeah, like, I mean, literally to go from uni, work out obviously that, teaching wasn't for you.
Mm,
I'll take a receptionist job at a company, just get me through to suddenly you've got this flourishing career within, a very, I suppose people outside of the IT industry won't necessarily know who Softcat are, but
mm,
actually the brand and the employee branding and everything that Softcat have got and their graduate schemes are really, really well known from. So people that want to necessarily get into IT or IT sales or the technical side, Softcat comes up a lot. They're
yeah.
up there with, when you go on Glassdoor and you look at the amount of reviews and the comparisons of the big tech companies, you've got, Softcat up against the likes of Computer Center and Dell
Hmm.
and HP and IBM. You're all up there.
Yeah.
And the story of Softcat alone is actually one of like, it's just incredible the way they've grown.
Mm,
But like you said, their internal mobility is something that, again, you hear a lot about. A lot of
yeah.
people who go in there do tend to change and progress throughout. So I'm really intrigued to know about, how you went from obviously doing a receptionist role to
Hmm.
your first initial position in recruitment. And because if you'd never done recruitment before, I'm intrigued to know how you learned about it and what you've done to progress your knowledge and career base, I suppose, through the last 10 years. So can you talk me through that a bit?
100%. So going back to my earlier point, I've always, even before knowing that talent and people was a passion of mine, I always knew that connection was at the center of everything I did. So I've
Mm,
always very much identified at a very early age that connecting with people was something that really gave me a buzz, for lack of a better word. And I've always
mm,
been that person in friendship groups that brings people together and those real kind of
yeah,
natural instincts for connecting with others. So, as you know, being in recruitment yourself, that's kind of recruitment 101, being able to
yeah,
connect and relate and really just tell a story and understand what people want from you. So,
yeah.
I knew I had this skill set quite early on that could sit within a recruitment role and be and allow me to be quite successful within a recruitment role.
Mm,
Um, but back to your question around how I got to that kind of first step into recruitment, I was on reception for about 6 months or so.
mhm,
The reception role was a bit of a blended role. So we were obviously a very different organization back then. Obviously, fast forward 10 years, we're now a PLC. We weren't back then. We're now
Yeah.
I would definitely dare to say, a much more structured organization than we were back then.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of fluidity in terms of jobs and what the roles and responsibilities of certain jobs were. My primary focus was, I was front desk and I was on reception, but I was also acting PA to our Northern Sales Director at the time, a
Yeah.
chap called Jamie Burke.
Yeah.
Um,
I remember Jamie. Yeah.
yeah, fantastic. I had a great experience working with Jamie personally.
Mm.
And he again became quite invested in me quite quickly, and was very open when I did get to a stage of, I don't know if this role is going to fulfill me long term. He was very open
Yeah.
to what that could look like for me. So I think the first point of that is, I had a manager who was very open to, whatever this development looks like for you, whatever you want to do with your career here, I want to
Yeah.
provide you with the opportunity to look at those things, rather than you do hear stories of people being like, well, if that kind of, if I can't have you, nobody can type of mindset. It definitely wasn't that with
Yeah.
Jamie. He was very open to looking at what could fulfill me if it meant me staying at Softcat. So
Yeah.
that was great. And then alongside that, I'd also had quite a lot of exposure to a couple of the girls who sat within our HR team, or HR and recruitment team at the time. So
Okay.
we used to run bi-weekly assessment centres. So a couple of the
Okay.
girls would come up to the Manchester office from Marlow every couple of weeks. And it was very much just a case of me saying, I like the look of this. I want to get involved more. How can I support? How can I
Yeah.
help? It
Yeah.
started with just welcoming candidates in, and then it would be, actually, I want to do a bit more. And they were very open to, do you want to do the intro and get involved a bit
Yeah.
more, and that kind of stuff. So again, as I said, very fluid. There was no
Yeah.
official structure or anything. There was no real
No,
conversation until
no.
the point of a role going live, that was something I
Yeah.
wanted to do.
But learning those crucial bits as part of the
Yeah.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So as and when a role did become available, it was a very natural step for me to go, I think this is something I want to apply for. Now, up
Mm.
until that point, our entire HR division, as were most of our non-sales divisions, was situated and centralized in Marlow. So I actually was the first member of our recruitment team to be in any other office apart from Marlow. And that was a bit of a
Right.
risk at the beginning, because historically we had been very used to having our non-sales functions centralized in our head office.
Yeah.
Um, so to have a remote, what was technically then a remote worker, line manager in
Mm.
Marlow, me in
Mm.
Manchester, there was a couple of kind of question marks there in the beginning. But I think because I'd kind of proven myself by that point, people were saying a lot of good things. Jamie was backing me. It just was, yeah, it was kind of a
Yeah.
given that if I wanted to go for the opportunity, it's something we'd look at. So I went for the role, got the role, and then I was an internal recruiter in our Manchester office for a couple of
Yeah.
years. And then we started to expand that team, and I stepped up into a team leader role.
Brilliant.
And then last year, stepped up into the role I'm in now. So yeah, it's been a journey.
Amazing. Yeah. Now, I know obviously from previous conversations that obviously you took some time off to go on maternity leave, didn't
I
you?
did. Hmm.
And then came back. And I think, was it then you got the recruitment manager job? There was a bit of a journey into that position itself, wasn't there? So what happened there
Absolutely.
again?
So when I look at my career, though, I see it as kind of pre-maternity leave leash and
Yeah.
post-maternity leave leash. It feels like two
Yeah.
different people. And you'll
Yeah.
probably get that being a mum yourself, and any mums out there will
Yeah.
totally get it. I genuinely feel like a different person now in comparison to the
Yeah.
person before having my little boy Max. Not just generally who I am, but the way I think about my career, the way I approach my career has just flipped on its head.
Mm. Mm.
Um, so I've always been ambitious. I've always known I wanted big things, but I think I probably lacked a bit of direction and
Yeah.
intentionality before having
Yeah.
Max. Went and had Max, and I've talked about it really openly in a number of forums. I had a really tough time off the back of having Max. I had a really
No.
significant case of postnatal depression and
Gosh.
anxiety.
Yeah.
And that didn't really start to get much better until I'd probably say around the 6 month mark. By
Okay.
around 9 months or so postnatal, I was starting to feel more myself. And then by the time I
Mm.
came back to work, I was in a place where, for the most part, I was back to
Yeah.
feeling relatively normal.
Yeah.
But alongside that, unfortunately, I say unfortunately, fortunately, because she's still in my team and she's like my right hand. But the person who had covered me when I was off on
Yeah.
maternity leave, she's a lady called Tia Bradley. She is exceptional. So I had not only been going through all of these emotions of postnatal and all of the stuff that comes alongside that, and then I'd also had this real creeping feeling of insecurity and self-doubt, knowing that
Mm.
the person doing my role was just amazing. And I
Yeah,
definitely had all
yeah,
of those really stereotypical cliche questions running through my mind for that entire year of, am I going to be needed when I go back? What's the
yeah,
value I'm going to
yeah.
be able to add? Tia's doing such a
Hmm.
fantastic job.
Hmm.
Why would the guys need or want me anymore? So that was
Yeah.
a real kind of journey I had to go on to
Mm.
revalidate myself and get to a place where I understood that I still had a lot to bring. And I
Yeah.
think, and I had this conversation with a lot of women because off the back of my experience returning, I became a buddy within our returner program here at Softcat. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
so I work with a lot and have worked with a lot of returners coming back into the business. And I've had
Yeah.
this conversation a lot where I really don't want to simplify it and make it sound very easy because it's not. And we both know it's not.
Mm.
It's the most vulnerable period of a woman's life. But
Yeah.
I do feel like coming back to work after having a baby, if that's the choice you make, you have a choice. If you do want to drive forward with your career and you want to carry on doing big things, you have a choice as to whether you let those insecurities get in there and set in and niggle
Yeah.
away at you, or whether you
Hmm.
make the active choice to drive forward and
Yeah.
put the fear aside and put the anxiety aside and all the insecurity
Yeah.
and doubt and just really just do your best to own what you have to bring and
Yeah.
really showcase your value. And I
Yeah. Yeah.
made, thankfully, the latter choice, and
Yeah.
came back with a renewed energy. I felt it's that age old cliche of going back to work, having adult conversation again, hot drinks, not being
Yeah.
attached to a baby
Yeah.
24/7.
Yeah.
Um, I immediately, quite quickly, felt very energized. I
Yeah.
felt a real drive to do bigger, better, more exciting things. And I very
Yeah.
quickly started having conversations with my line management team around I want to do more, I want to be involved in more, I'm excited to be back, and I want to just use this momentum and keep moving forward. So,
Yeah.
back to your question around kind of returning, I had quite a quick sort of a litany of quick wins when I came back. So within 6 months of returning, I was selected to go on our leadership foundations program here at Softcat. So
Nice.
that's
Yeah.
a succession planning program. We run a couple of cohorts a year, and that was a real turning point experience for me because that was
Okay.
the first time that I'd really immersed myself in the idea and the theory and the concepts around the difference between people
Mm.
management and
Hmm.
leadership. And that's not
Yeah.
something I'd really had much exposure to before. So there was a lot of learning there that was really transformational for me. And then outside of that, obviously, Rachel, who's my manager, found out she was pregnant, and we obviously knew that role was coming up, which would be to cover her maternity leave. And thankfully, just because of all the work I'd done and the investment in me from the business, it was a conversation that we started having very early on that this could be a relevant and appropriate
Yeah.
opportunity for me to step into that role. So stepped into that role last year, and then moving forward from there, I was lucky enough to be put forward by Softcat as an organisation for a CRN award last year at the Women in Channel and Diversity
Yes.
Awards, which was the Outstanding Returner Award. And I would have put my mortgage on not winning, Zoe. Literally would have put
Yeah.
my mortgage on not winning, and went and won, which was just insane. Still
Yeah.
processing now when I say that out loud. Um,
Well
so
done.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. So it's the long and short of it is it's been a real journey. And I think
Yeah. Sounds like it.
I am super aware because I am perky and peppy and
Mm.
chatty and like that it can come across like things have been relatively easy or there hasn't been a huge amount of challenge because I am more on the optimistic side. I'm definitely a glass half full kind of gal.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's been a real up and down journey, and there's been some real challenging times in there. And I think the biggest takeaway for me over the last few years has been the importance of proactively working to build your mental resilience. Because if I
Yeah.
hadn't had the level of resilience that I'd built up over the years, I think it probably would have been, or it would have been a much more challenging time than it was anyway. And whether I would have come out the end of it in the way I have is
Yeah.
questionable.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've done incredibly well. And I think that by no means is any of that easy as well. To come off of the back of postnatal depression, which,
Mm.
some women are still going through that, years later, and juggling with, old life meets new life, because it is a massive
Oh yeah.
change. And I don't think people quite realize the impact it does have on you. And I'm testament to that, because when did you have Max?
So Max was born in June 21.
Yeah, so my Jake was the year before in 2020, and I was sort of caught in the COVID
Yeah.
year where I was finally pregnant and we were about to have a baby, and then COVID hit and
Yeah.
everything's taken away from you, and you're like, oh, you
Yeah.
happens. But you do have to fight for your career, and you and I are very passionate about this, because
Mm.
it isn't easy. It's not easy for a lot of people, but it generally isn't easy for women to have high profile careers, or certainly very, very successful careers. And we all have to fight very, very, very hard to get to
Mm.
where we are. And you look at any of the top female leaders in the world, and they will talk you through the absolute journeys that they have had. So to come back after all of that is no mean feat, and you have to give yourself that absolute pat on the back, because you
Mm.
absolutely deserve it. And I think what we need to take from this is, the fact that it isn't easy, but also, okay, what can we learn from this, and what
Yeah.
can we give the next generation of people that are looking to build their careers, but also women. If you're thinking about a career in the IT industry, that is one topic that keeps coming up at the moment, is
Hmm.
how can we get more women and more diversity into the industry. So you and I are fortunate enough that we got selected to be CRN Diversity Leaders of the Year. Yeah, yes,
Hmm.
which is great. And we did articles, and we're judging this year's awards as well. So that's going to be fun, getting us two
Yeah.
together. Sorry, everybody else.
I'm telling you, it feels like
But
we're becoming a bit of a package deal, though.
I know this could be trouble. Hopefully there won't be wine involved, because then we're really in trouble. And it could go mad. But I really want to talk to you about the diversity side of things
Yeah.
here, and women and diversity. And I know you're very, very passionate about this. So talk to me a little bit about, I say a little bit, I mean a lot. Talk to me about, why you're so passionate about it, and what you're trying to proactively do to encourage more of this as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. So I feel, and I don't, when I say this, I want to caveat it with, I don't want to in any way diminish the great proactive, strategic, commercial work that a lot of organizations are doing
Yes.
in the D&I space, because that's
Yes.
unequivocally a massive piece of that puzzle, to be putting mechanisms in place to have the right processes, the right data management, all that kind of stuff to enable us to
Yes.
continue to diversify our workforces. But
Hmm.
on a smaller scale, if we're talking about me or you, or what any woman out there can do to have an impact in her organization, if that's something she's passionate about,
Mm.
I really feel the biggest power we have as individuals is our own story. And
Mm.
I really
I
do
agree.
believe that there is so much power in sharing your experience in a way that connects with other people. And that is
Yeah.
all I've done, though. Like I have been shocked by how much just telling a story about what I've been through has
Mhm.
resonated with people. And I've
Yeah.
had so many women, it sounds so cliched, because like you hear people say, oh, so many women reach out to me. I've had so many women reach out and say, I really identified with that, or I've been through that
Yeah.
myself, or like the power of female connection and,
Mm.
dare I say, friendship and community
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
just like it gives me chills. Like as women,
Yeah.
we are innately drawn to want to connect. Well, as human beings, we are innately drawn to want to connect
Yeah,
with
we
each other,
are.
but
Mm.
as women, we want to connect with each other's stories, and we look for ourselves in other people's stories. So
Mm.
back to your question, I feel like the main piece of power and ability to impact change we have as individuals is by using our stories to allow people, other women, to be seen in our experiences. So that's something that I did coming back from maternity leave. As I said, I became a buddy on our returner program, which was the first kind of proactive piece of work I looked to do. It felt like I'd had thankfully a really great returning experience.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that because there is, as with any organization, there is inconsistency in managerial experience and the service that managers will give to their people coming back in,
Yeah.
and more experienced managers versus less experienced managers. So I wanted to make sure that whoever was coming back into the organization, returning from maternity leave, had the right level of support and somebody who really identified with that journey. So that was something that I felt I could have an impact with, and that was where I started. From there, it kind of spiraled out of control a little bit. The conversations went from being very returner specific to
Yeah.
then it kind of morphed into being more confidence building and
Okay.
reestablishing your own value, because that they were the themes that were coming out of all of those returner conversations. As I said earlier,
Yeah.
I felt it myself coming back. That insecurity, that not knowing what you
Mm,
bring anymore, they
mm,
were the themes and the narratives that were coming up consistently.
yeah.
So the
Yeah.
conversations naturally started to kind of turn into more general confidence building conversations. And as I said, realizing your potential, identifying your value. And then I started to have women who weren't returners, but who'd had conversation with other people about this type of thing coming my way, saying,
Mm,
I'd love to know more. I struggle with my own confidence. Um,
okay.
and then I've always mentored people quite a lot internally. So
Yeah.
they've always been conversations I've been having on a one-on-one basis with mentees, and focuses of work. But then it kind of morphed into running some internal workshops around confidence building,
Yeah.
understanding your value, identifying and articulating your value.
Yeah.
And then more recently, it's been kind of around, and I know me and you were talking about this earlier, more around that personal brand piece. And once you've
Yeah.
identified and are able to effectively articulate your value, what do you do with that? How do you
Yeah.
get people to understand it? And how do you get the right opportunities, development and career opportunities coming your way by
Yeah.
effectively being able to position your brand, articulate who you
Mm,
are and the value you bring? So it's been a bit of a kind of evolution in terms of the conversations I've been having with women, but the at the root of all of that has been, without sounding too cheesy, a real passion for enablement, empowerment, and just allowing women to feel seen and heard and
yeah.
validated in what they're feeling and they're experiencing. Because we
Yeah.
all know isolation's a killer, right? When you feel like you're the only person going through X thing or feeling Y
Yeah.
feeling, you
Yeah.
get really in your own head. And if you're shutting
Yeah.
down, like, you go very inward. Whereas
Yes.
where I feel like we are able to have an impact is by, if you are confident and comfortable enough to do so, be the
Mm,
person who tells the story about that struggle so that other people can
yeah.
see themselves in it and actually identify with it and go, oh, I'm not the only one. And
Yeah.
this sounds so simple, Zoe, and I've heard it on probably a million podcasts and interviews before, but the reason it's that age-old thing, it's a cliche for a reason, because
Yeah.
it's true. People just want to feel seen, heard, and validated. And if you are brave enough
Yeah.
and confident enough to share your own story, and that
Yeah.
allows people to do that, then
Yeah.
for me, that's the most powerful thing you can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of that drips through into, as I said earlier, and you've said it yourself, there's kind of more tangible diversity metrics. And
Yeah.
if you have an environment that feels inclusive and women feel
Yeah.
like they belong and they can own their vulnerabilities, and they're not expected to slap a smile on it and be okay. They can
Yeah.
talk about the things they're struggling with and talk about their challenges openly, and they're not going to be met with judgment. They're going to be met with understanding, and a lot of the time even someone else going, me too. And I think
Yeah. Yeah.
that an environment like that is powerful and
Yeah.
enabling and empowering, and that's when you're really going to see the most out of your
Yeah.
women and the female talent coming up through your organization.
Yeah.
So it's a very round the houses answer for you, but hopefully that gives you
No,
a
it's
little bit
brilliant.
more
It's really,
visibility.
really, and it's so important as well. And you know, when you were talking about personal branding, it's such an interesting one because I think about my own sort of career, my journey so far since setting up, you know, my business. You know, it was a big leap for me. I came off of maternity, decided to
Mm,
resign from a company where I had a lot of, a lot of support, but I also had a lot of stability there.
yeah.
And I thought, well, no, it's all right. I'm going to set up my own business off the back of a massive pandemic, having a baby, haven't worked for basically 15 months. Sod it. If I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. And I remember being hit with so much criticism to begin with, if by like friends and even family members who were like, "Oh, are you sure you want to do this? It's a bit of a risk, isn't it? I mean, you've just had a baby. You sure you're going to
Yeah.
join a company?" And it wasn't even that. I mean, even, people that I used to work with as well.
Mm.
And then when I got going, I thought, oh, I've got to start building my own brand. And I did that by putting videos of myself up there. Now, I am not a vain person. I do not think I am all amazing person, but I was like, do you know what? Sod it. I'm just going to be me. And people
Yeah.
can either like it or lump it. And
Hmm.
it kind of landed well because I wasn't trying to be fake. And I got a lot of feedback
Yeah.
saying, oh, I really like your videos because you're just talking about the jobs that you're working on and you talk about a little bit what's going on in your life and people can relate to it a lot. I talked
Yeah.
about my child and my son was 10 months old when I set the business up. So he was still a baby. I wasn't getting great sleep and
Yeah.
I was working and I think a lot of people start to relate to it. And then the more, and obviously you're building your own personal brand up,
Yeah.
I found I was able to win business quite easily. And then the brand of the business itself builds and builds and builds. And I think you're absolutely right. As, women or, people of any sort of background where you're in a minority,
Hmm.
you've got to put yourself out there. I talk to people a lot about, when they're searching for jobs, if they've been made redundant, they've been on the market a while, or they're looking to promote themselves from within. You need to be proactive, you need to be
Yeah.
productive, you need to put yourself out there. And, as part of
100%.
the channel community, we did that about how to stand out from the crowd. And
Yeah.
and I said, if you want a promotion, don't sit and wait for, someone to say to you, congratulations, we're considering you for promotion. You've got to say to them, how do I get that?
Intentionality.
Yeah,
Yes.
like set your
Yes.
intentions out. How do I get that promotion? What do I need to do to get that
100%.
new job role? With the way the job market is right now, as we know, it's really tough for candidates out there. There are, 10 times as many candidates that to the jobs that are out there. So candidates are finding it exceptionally tough right now. And I have
Hmm.
more conversations on a daily basis about what the market's doing and advice to give them than actual jobs that I am working on because I'm
Yeah.
trying to help more people stand out. You
Yeah.
know, they're saying things to me like, "Oh, I'm applying for jobs and there's 300 applications," and so I just don't bother applying because I'm not going to get seen. And I'm like, well, 98% of those applications won't be right.
Hmm.
So do apply for it. And,
Yeah.
on top of that, message the hiring person
Yeah.
and tell them that you've applied. Put yourself out there, email them, call
Yeah.
them, whatever you need to do. And I think there's a lot of lack of confidence out there.
100% so. And so I was literally a few times when you were talking then was thinking I should have brought a pen and paper because I have like 5 million thoughts popping into my mind as we're talking and
Yeah,
so much there that I want to unpack. So I think one, I totally agree. So I think going back to your point around put yourself out there, do something different. I absolutely agree
yeah.
with all of that because I
Mm,
have kind of gone on that journey myself over the last couple of years of being more intentional with my career, thinking outside the box, getting my
yeah,
face out there more, getting my value out there more. But I think there's a
yeah,
step, as you've just said there yourself, a step before that of
yeah,
how do we build people's confidence to be able to do that? And when I say
yeah.
people, specifically women, because that's the issue. It's
Mm,
very easy for us, maybe further along in our career or maybe slightly more confident than most, to go just ask for what you want or go and call somebody or do something a bit out the box to get noticed. But if you're constantly feeding yourself this negative narrative about how you're not good enough, you're not going to stack up, all those negative thoughts running through your mind, you're not going to feel capable of doing something like that. So it's about
no,
that. How are we as organizations working with our women and our upcoming talent and our
talent.
female
Yeah,
population
yeah,
generally to get them to a place where they're able to establish their value, articulate it effectively, and therefore be more proactive and intentional, as we've just said there. So I think that's
yeah,
definitely a
yeah.
piece of it. The other thing that came through my mind as you were talking about all those different pieces was at the root
Mm,
of every single thing you said was connection. So
yeah, yeah.
you were talking about how reaching out to someone and putting yourself out there. You were talking about your own experience with
Mm,
starting your own brand, building your own brand. You really do underestimate the power of connection. As you've said, you were flying by the seat of your pants. I'm guessing, you haven't told me this, but I'm guessing hadn't done any kind of formal brand training or gone on a course or anything. You were just kind of like, I'm just going to
Yep.
wing it. And I'm going to
Yep.
put myself out there. I'm going to see if people
Totally
connect with it.
winged it. Yeah.
What we're all doing, right? All winging it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you put yourself out there in a way that was authentic and people connected with it. And if nothing
Mm.
else, it siphons off the people that aren't your target audience. They're not your demographic. They don't relate
Yeah.
to you. Something about what you're doing isn't resonating with them. And that's fine. Nobody
Yeah.
and nothing is everybody's cup of tea. We know that.
Yeah.
We get told that from day one. What I
Absolutely.
think is something that we should be further encouraging and also kind of having the conversation around with women earlier on in their career is the importance and the power of personal branding, and
Yeah.
how kind of try and squash some of those misconceptions around, and you referenced it yourself around when you said about putting the video content up, I'm not a vain person. As women, we're taught that other people should validate us. We shouldn't be validating ourselves. Other
Yeah.
people should tell us why we're great. We shouldn't be telling other people why we're great.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that is inbuilt into us as women
Yeah.
growing up, to
Yeah.
wait to be told why we are worth it. And in
Yeah.
actual
Yeah.
fact, what we want to be doing and what we should be doing is working consciously and proactively and intentionally to change that narrative with women earlier on in their careers.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about yourself more, empower yourself more, champion yourself more, because if you don't do it, the likelihood of other people doing it for you is slimmer. You
Yeah.
need to be able to articulate what you bring before other people are going to notice it and then start plugging you into opportunities. So going back to that personal branding piece, it's really weird. I have a little draft on my LinkedIn app at the moment of a post I'm going to be putting up over the next couple of days, which is very closely linked to this particular topic. The
Like it. Yeah.
misconceptions, the misconceptions around personal branding, and primarily, I think it is the fact that it's kind of self-indulgent, rooted in vanity. Why is
Yeah.
she everywhere? Like,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
when it's from an online presence point of view. And in
Mm-hmm.
actual fact, we need to be changing that narrative into the benefits and the value you can get out of being more intentional with your career, more intentional with the brand, if we want to put it like that you're putting
Yeah.
out there,
Yeah.
how you're articulating your value. All of that stuff equals opportunity for you in your career if it's done
Yeah.
in the right way. Obviously, the
Yeah.
caveat is done in the right way. Um,
Yes.
we've all seen it done in the wrong way. So my point being, I think that's something we should be focusing more with women coming up earlier on in their careers, on
Agree.
how we can get them more comfortable with owning their own successes,
Yeah.
owning their own value, and
Mm.
being able to champion themselves without needing other people to do it first. I think that's something that we really need to be focusing on. And I think if we did that, then lots of the other great bits would follow. That piece around be more intentional, be more proactive, think outside the box, think about how you're setting yourself apart. If you know what
Mm.
you bring, that ultimately is then going to allow you to think, well, I know what I bring, so how do I use that to set myself apart? It's
Yeah.
like we're working towards an end goal that you've not done the work to understand how you get there yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, just
I
like I
think that's
said, I
brilliant.
should have had a pen and paper. So I had
I
so many
know. And
thoughts.
the thing is, like, actually, it's a really lovely way to kind of wrap up and end our conversation, which we could carry
Oh.
on so much more. We could do multiple interviews, but I think ending it on that is just absolutely golden. And I hope today that, people watching and listening to this can take a piece from this to know that it's okay to talk about your successes. It's
Oh my
okay to
God,
put
yeah.
yourself out there. It's okay to ask for these promotions, apply for that job,
Mm.
whatever it takes. There are so many good golden nuggets in there. And no, as I say, we could talk so much more.
We
But
really
we're going to
could
have
so.
to end our call dramatically today. So Elisha, I know you're going to be hanging on for a second, but no, thank you so much for today's call. I really
You're
hope
so
that
welcome.
everyone enjoyed it. Maybe this is part one, and we'll do
It
a
probably
part
has
two
to be.
later down the line. I can absolutely see that happening. So yeah, thank you so much,
You're
and
so welcome, so.
yeah, we'll see what happens next.